Taman Park walked through the long, white hallways of the Galactic Council Station, and his old leather shoes made soft sounds on the smooth floor. He carried his worn brown briefcase in his right hand and checked his watch with his left. The meeting would start in 30 minutes, and he needed to be ready. For 15 years, he had done this same walk to the same room, to talk to the same alien beings who never really listened to what he had to say. The hallways were huge and bright, with lights that came from everywhere at once. The walls were made of some kind of white metal that never got dirty and never showed scratches. Everything here was perfect and clean and cold. Taman always felt small in these hallways, like a child walking through a giant's house. The aliens who built this place were much taller than humans, and everything was made for their size. Other beings moved through the hallways, too. The tall blue Nexari walked on their long, thin legs and made clicking sounds with their crystal fingers. The round, gray Malaki rolled along on their bottom sides and hummed low songs to each other. The snake-like Vorthak slithered past with their dark green scales shining under the lights. None of them looked at Taman or said hello. To them, he was just another human, and humans were not important. Taman reached his small office and opened the door with his key card. The room was tiny compared to the offices that the other species had. His desk was old and made of real wood from Earth, which looked strange next to all the metal and glass around it. On his desk were reports and files and photos of human colonies that needed help. He sat down in his chair and opened his briefcase. Inside were papers about the latest problems that humans faced in space. Pirates had attacked 3 cargo ships last month. A disease was spreading through the mining colony on Kepler 7. The agricultural world of New Harmony needed new equipment, but could not afford to buy it. Children on the research station near Proxima were not getting enough food. Every day, there were more problems, and every day the council found reasons to ignore them. The door chimed, and Taman looked up to see Captain Minho Lee standing in the doorway. Minho was a tall man with short black hair and serious dark eyes. He wore the blue uniform of the United Earth Space Force and had the tired look of someone who had been traveling for many days. Behind him stood a woman in the same uniform with sharp eyes and quick movements. "Ambassador Park," Minho said as he stepped into the office. "We need to talk." Taman stood up and shook hands with both visitors. "Captain Lee, it is good to see you again. How was your journey from the outer colonies?" "Long and difficult," Minho replied. "This is Commander Yuna Kim, my security chief. She has been investigating some disturbing reports from the Rim worlds." Yuna stepped forward and placed a data pad on Taman's desk. "Ambassador, we have found something that the Council needs to know about immediately. The Vorthak are not just raiding human settlements anymore. They are taking people." Taman picked up the datapad and looked at the screen. Photos showed burned buildings and empty towns. Lists of names scrolled by with ages and occupations. Men, women, and children all missing. "How many?" he asked. "Over 50,000 in the last 6 months, Yuna said. "Entire communities have vanished. The Vorthak ships come in fast, take everyone they can carry, and leave. No demands for ransom. No communication at all. The people just disappear." Captain Minho sat down in the chair across from Taman's desk. "We tried to track one of their ships, but they have new technology that we have never seen before. Some kind of drive that lets them jump to hyperspace without using the normal jump points. Our ships cannot follow them." "Have you reported this to the Council security forces?" Taman asked. Yuna and Minho looked at each other. "We tried," Yuna said. "The Nexari commander told us that human colonists chose to live in dangerous areas and must accept the risks. The Malaki representative said that the Vorthak have the right to expand their territory as long as they follow proper procedures. No one wants to help." Taman set down the datapad and rubbed his forehead. This was worse than the usual problems that crossed his desk. Pirates and diseases and equipment failures were bad, but this was something else. This was organized and deliberate. "What do our intelligence sources tell us about Vorthak activities?" "That is the strange part," Minho said. "The Vorthak are not expanding into other species' territory. They only attack human settlements. It is like they are specifically targeting us." The door chimed again, and Dr. Hyok Choi entered the office. Hyok was a thin man with thick glasses and nervous hands. He worked in the station's biological research department studying alien life forms. Most of the other scientists treated him like a junior assistant, even though he had more degrees than many of them. Ambassador Park. I am sorry to interrupt, but I have found something that you need to see right away, Hyox said. He was breathing, hard like he had been running. What is it, Dr. Choi? Taemin asked. Hyok pulled out his own datapad and showed it to everyone in the room. I have been working on a project to catalog genetic samples from different species. Yesterday, I was given access to some restricted files in the main database. What I found there makes no sense, unless someone is doing something very wrong. The screen showed complex charts and graphs with numbers and symbols that meant nothing to Taemin. Can you explain this in simple terms, Doctor? The database contains genetic information from hundreds of species, including humans. But the human files are much larger than they should be. Someone has been collecting detailed genetic data from thousands of human subjects. Blood samples, tissue samples, even reproductive cells. Far more than would be needed for normal medical research. Yuna leaned forward to look at the screen. Where did these samples come from? That is what worries me, Hyuk said. According to the file dates, many of these samples were collected recently, within the last few years. But I know that no major human medical studies have been conducted during that time. The only way to get this much genetic material would be to take it from a large population without their knowledge. Captain Minho stood up quickly. Are you saying that someone has been experimenting on humans? I am saying that someone has been collecting human genetic material on a massive scale and storing it in a restricted council database. Who authorized this collection and why they need so much human DNA, I cannot tell you. Taemin felt cold, despite the warm air in his office. He looked at the datapad again and tried to understand what this meant. 50,000 humans had disappeared in the last 6 months. Someone was collecting human genetic material in secret. The Vorthak were attacking only human settlements with new technology that nobody had seen before. Dr. Choi. Can you find out who has access to these files? Taemin asked. I can try, but it will take time. The database security is very complex, and if I am caught looking at restricted information, I could lose my job or worse. Do it anyway, Taemin said. This is more important than jobs. Yuna stood up and walked to the small window in Taemin's office. Outside, she could see the long ships of different species docked at the station. Ambassador, what if this is not a coincidence? What if the disappearances and the genetic collection are connected? What do you mean? Taemin asked. What if someone is taking humans to harvest their genetic material? What if the Vorthak are working for someone else? The room became very quiet. Outside the window, alien ships came and went, carrying cargo and passengers between the stars. The station hummed with the sounds of business and diplomacy and trade. Everything looked normal, but Taemin knew that normal could be a lie. He looked at his watch again. 20 minutes until the council meeting. 20 minutes to decide how to present this information to beings who had already shown that they did not care about human problems. 20 minutes to find a way to make them listen. The council chamber was enormous and filled with the sounds of dozens of different species talking in their own languages. Taemin walked down the long ramp toward the small platform where humans were allowed to speak. Above him, the great dome. Ceiling showed images of stars and planets from across the galaxy. The air smelled of strange chemicals and alien breathing gases. The platform for human representatives was much smaller than the others and placed lower than the rest. This was supposed to show that humans were a junior species who needed guidance from their betters. Taemin had stood on this platform hundreds of times, and each time he felt the weight of their contempt pressing down on him. Around the chamber, the representatives of 47 different species sat in their special chairs or pools or hanging platforms. Each species had their own environment and their own way of showing that they belonged here. The humans had a simple chair and a small microphone. Council Speaker Veltharian of the Nexari race called the meeting to order. The Nexari were tall, crystalline beings who looked like living glass sculptures. Their voices sounded like wind chimes when they spoke. Veltharian was old, even by Nexari standards, and his crystal body had taken on a deep blue color that meant wisdom among his people. The council recognizes the human representative, Veltharian said in the flat tone that universal translators gave to all alien speech. You have requested emergency session time. State your concerns quickly as we have important matters to discuss today. Taemin stepped up to his microphone and looked around the chamber. Most of the aliens were not even looking at him. Some were talking quietly to each other. Others were reading reports or checking their communication devices. This was normal treatment for human concerns, but today it made him angry in a way he had never felt before. "Honored council members," he began, "I come before you today with evidence of serious crimes being committed against human civilians in the outer colonies. Over the past 6 months, more than 50,000 humans have disappeared from their homes. Entire communities have been taken by Vorthak raiders who are using new technology that our ships cannot track." A few of the alien representatives looked up with mild interest, but most continued to ignore him. The Vorthak representative was a large, snake-like creature with dark green scales and cold yellow eyes. He did not seem concerned about being accused of crimes. Furthermore, Taman continued, "We have discovered that someone has been collecting human genetic material on a massive scale without permission or knowledge of the human government. This genetic data is being stored in restricted council databases, and we demand to know who authorized this collection and for what purpose." Now more aliens were paying attention. Some were whispering to their assistants or sending messages on their devices. The Molaki representative, who looked like a large gray sphere with many small arms, made a sound like air being let out of a balloon, which meant disagreement in their language. Councillor Thurvak of the Molaki spoke first. "The human representative makes serious accusations without proof. The outer colonies are dangerous places where many species face risks. If humans choose to settle in areas beyond our protection, they must accept the consequences of their choices. The Vorthak have the ancient right of expansion," added Representative Zesk of the Vorthak hegemony. His voice was a low hiss that the translators turned into words. "If primitive species cannot defend their territories, then stronger species may claim those territories according to galactic law. This has always been the way of things." Taman felt his hands shake with anger. "These are not military targets or empty territories. These are homes with families and children. The people who are disappearing include scientists and teachers and farmers who have never harmed anyone. Human emotion is understandable but irrelevant," said Veltharion. "The Council cannot be expected to protect every small settlement that humans choose to establish in remote locations. Perhaps it would be better if your species concentrated their population in fewer, more defensible areas." Before Taman could respond, the chamber doors burst open, and Lieutenant Jiwon Song ran down the ramp toward the human platform. She was young and out of breath, and her uniform was wrinkled from travel. Behind her came 2 security guards who were trying to stop her, but she was too fast for them. "Ambassador Park," she called out. "Emergency message from Fleet Command. You need to hear this right now." The alien representatives began making angry sounds at the interruption. Security guards moved toward Jiwon, but Taman held up his hand. "This is my aide, and she has the right to deliver urgent communications to—" The human representative Jiwon reached the platform and handed Taman a communication device. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Sir, it is about New Busan and the agricultural colonies. The message came through just a few minutes." Taman activated the device, and the voice of Admiral Kangmin Seo filled the chamber through the speakers. The message was recorded, but the sound quality was clear enough for everyone to hear. "All stations, this is Fleet Command with emergency bulletin. At 0600 hours local time, the Vorthak fleet conducted orbital bombardment of 3 human agricultural worlds, including New Busan. Initial reports indicate complete destruction of all surface installations. Casualty estimates are approximately 2 million civilians, including children at the orbital education facilities." The chamber became very quiet. Even the aliens who had been ignoring Taman were now listening carefully. The voice of Admiral Seo continued with more details about the attack and the complete destruction of the human colonies. "Furthermore, our deep space monitors have detected Vorthak ships leaving the area with what appear to be prisoner transports. It is believed that surviving civilians have been taken for unknown purposes. All human ships are ordered to avoid Vorthak territory until further notice." Taman turned off the device and looked around the chamber. Some of the alien representatives seemed surprised by the news, but others did not look surprised at all. A few were even making sounds that might have been satisfaction. 2 million humans are dead," Taman said into his microphone, "including children who were studying at our schools in orbit around New Busan. This was not expansion or territorial dispute. This was mass murder. Representative Zesk of the Vorthak made a dismissive gesture with one of his scaled arms. Regrettable casualties during legitimate military operations. The human colonies were established without proper permission in Vorthak space. Our forces acted within their rights to remove unauthorized settlements. Those colonies had been there for 20 years, Taman said. They were registered with the Council and recognized as legitimate human settlements. Children were born there and lived their entire lives there. How can you call them unauthorized? Councillor Thurvok of the Malaki rolled forward on his spherical body. The human representative is becoming emotional, which clouds his judgment. Perhaps it would be best to table this discussion for future consideration when more information is available. Taman could not believe what he was hearing. 2 million humans had just been murdered, and the Council wanted to table the discussion. He looked around the chamber and saw that many of the aliens were already preparing to leave. To them, this was just another minor incident involving the troublesome human species. Wait, he called out. You cannot just ignore this. We are talking about genocide. We are talking about territorial disputes between junior species, said Veltharion. The Council cannot be expected to referee every conflict in the outer regions. Both sides should seek peaceful solutions through proper diplomatic channels. That was when Taman noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the viewing screens around the chamber, he could see the current locations of Council fleet ships. Most species had their main fleets positioned near their home worlds or important trade routes. But the Vorthak fleet positions showed something very different. Every major human colony was being watched by Vorthak ships. Every human trade route had Vorthak vessels nearby. Every human research station and mining operation and agricultural world was surrounded. This was not random raiding or territorial expansion. This was a coordinated effort to monitor and control every human activity in space. Lieutenant Jiwan saw where he was looking and whispered in his ear, "Sir, there is more." Commander Yuna found communications intercepts that suggest the Vorthak have been sharing information with other Council species. They know exactly where every human ship and settlement is located because someone has been giving them our navigation data. Taman felt like someone had hit him in the stomach. The Council had access to all human navigation data because it was required for the protection services they were supposed to provide. If someone was sharing that data with the Vorthak, then the attacks were not just tolerated by the Council. They were being helped by the Council. He looked around the chamber at the alien faces staring down at him. Some looked bored, and others looked annoyed that their time was being wasted. But a few looked satisfied, like they were watching a plan. Work exactly as intended. For 15 years, he had believed that the aliens simply did not understand humans or care about their problems. Now he realized the truth was much worse. They understood perfectly, and they did care about human problems. Taman stood at his small platform and looked up at the dozens of alien faces surrounding him in the great chamber. His hands were no longer shaking, and his voice was steady when he spoke. The anger he felt had become something colder and more focused. "I have served as humanity's representative to this Council for 15 years, he said into his microphone. In all that time, I believed that we were part of something greater than ourselves. I believed that different species could work together for peace and prosperity across the galaxy. Many of the aliens were still not paying attention to him. Some were having quiet conversations with their assistants. Others were looking at their communication devices or reading reports. This was normal behavior when humans spoke, but today it felt different to Taman. I believed that when humans had problems, you would help us find solutions. When we faced dangers, you would stand with us as allies. When we needed guidance, you would share your wisdom with us as friends. I was wrong about all of these things." Now some of the alien representatives were looking at him with more interest. The tone of his voice was different from usual, and they could sense that something had changed. Lieutenant Jiwan stood near the platform with her communication device ready. She had been receiving messages from human ships and colonies across the galaxy. The news was spreading quickly that New Busan had been destroyed and that the Council was doing nothing to help. "Today I learned that 50,000 humans have disappeared from their homes, and you call it territorial expansion. I learned that 2 million humans, including children, have been murdered, and you want to table the discussion. I learned that human genetic material is being collected without our knowledge and stored in your databases. I learned that Vorthak ships are positioned to watch every human settlement because someone is sharing our location data with them." The chamber was becoming quieter as more aliens stopped their conversations to listen. Council Speaker Veltharion raised one of his crystal arms in a gesture that meant he wanted to speak. "The human representative is making accusations without evidence," Veltharion said. "These emotional outbursts do not help find solutions to complex problems. Perhaps the human delegation would benefit from a cooling-off period before returning to discuss these matters rationally." Taman reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick document with the official seal of the United Earth government. The document was bound in blue leather and tied with golden ribbon. Every alien in the chamber recognized it as the Treaty of Solar Integration that had made humanity a protected junior species under Council oversight 30 years ago. "For 3 decades, humans have lived under this treaty," Taman said, as he held up the document. "We accepted junior status because we thought it would bring us into a community of civilized species. We followed your rules and respected your laws and asked for permission before making any major decisions." He untied the golden ribbon and let it fall to the floor. "We believed that protection meant you would keep us safe from harm. We believed that oversight meant you would guide us toward becoming a better species. We believed that junior status was temporary, and that someday we would earn full membership in this community." The ribbon lay on the floor like a golden snake. Taman opened the leather binding and began turning pages. The treaty was written in dozens of languages, including human script, and each page contained the signatures and seals of all the species who had agreed to its terms. "Today I realized what protection really means to you. Protection means keeping us weak so we cannot threaten your positions. Oversight means controlling our growth so we cannot compete with your industries. Junior status means we exist only as long as you find us useful." Representative Zask of the Vorthak made an impatient sound. "Human philosophy is tiresome. If your species has complaints about treaty terms, then submit proper paperwork through diplomatic channels and wait for review. This emergency session was called to discuss urgent matters, not to listen to speeches." Taman looked directly at the Vorthak representative. "You are right that this session is about urgent matters. The most urgent matter is that humans are dying while you watch and do nothing. The second most urgent matter is that some of you are helping to kill them." He began tearing pages out of the treaty. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the chamber as 30 years of agreements and promises were destroyed. Alien voices rose in shock and anger at this violation of diplomatic protocol. "The Treaty of Solar Integration is hereby dissolved," Taman said as he continued tearing pages. "Humanity withdraws from all agreements made under Council oversight. We reject junior species status and all protections that come with it. We reject Council authority over human activities and Council access to human territory." Council Speaker Veltharion stood up on his crystal legs. "This action is not legal under galactic law. The human representative does not have authority to dissolve treaties without approval from the human government." Lieutenant Jiwan activated her communication device and the voice of President Myung Bay filled the chamber. The message was being broadcast live from Earth to every human ship and colony in the galaxy. "Citizens of Earth and all human settlements," the president's voice said, "I have been informed of the attack on New Busan and the Council's refusal to provide assistance. Effective immediately, I am authorizing Ambassador Park to take all necessary actions to protect human interests. The government of Earth stands behind his decisions completely." Taman continued tearing pages from the treaty as the president's message played. "Furthermore," the voice continued, "I am activating emergency protocols that have been in place since the first human ships left our solar system. All human colonies and ships are now under direct Earth government control. All Council representatives are ordered to leave human territory within 24 hours. The chamber erupted in alien voices, speaking in dozens of languages. The universal translators could not keep up with all the different sounds and the air, filled with electronic noise. Security guards moved toward the human platform, but stopped when they saw that Taman was not trying to escape. "You cannot simply leave the Council," shouted Councillor Thurvak of the Malaki. "Your species signed binding agreements that cannot be broken unilaterally. There will be consequences for this illegal action." Taman threw the remains of the treaty onto the floor where the torn pages scattered across the platform. "Let me tell you about consequences," he said. His voice was now being broadcast to every human ship station and colony through Lieutenant Jiwan's communication system. "For 15 years, I have sat in this chamber and listened to your lectures about civilization and diplomacy and peaceful cooperation. I have watched you ignore human suffering and dismiss human concerns and treat us like children who do not understand the adult world of galactic politics. He stepped down from the platform and began walking toward the chamber exit. Lieutenant G1 followed behind him while alien security guards watched nervously. No human representative had ever left a council session without permission. You taught us that the galaxy is ruled by strength, not justice. You taught us that survival depends on power, not friendship. You taught us that civilized species will watch genocide happen as long as it does not affect their own interests. The alien voices were getting louder and more angry, but Taman continued walking. At the top of the ramp, he turned back to face the chamber full of creatures who had once seemed so wise and powerful. Now they just looked like bullies who had been challenged for the first time. You wanted us to learn how the galaxy really works, he said. Congratulations, we learned. We learned that there is no justice among the stars. We learned that peace exists only when someone is strong enough to enforce it. We learned that the only protection we can count on is the protection we provide for ourselves. Council Speaker Veltharian's crystal body was glowing brighter with anger. If humans leave the council, you will have no legal protection under galactic law. Any species will be free to attack human settlements without consequences. You will be completely alone. Taman smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. We have been alone for years and just did not realize it. The difference now is that we will not pretend to have friends who want to see us dead. He reached the chamber doors and turned one final time to address the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations. You have taught us a valuable lesson about the universe. There is no civilization here. There is no wisdom. There is no honor. There are only predators and prey. The chamber fell silent as every alien waited to hear what the human would say next. Outside the station windows, they could see human ships beginning to move into new formations. Captain Minho Lee's vessel was broadcasting signals to other human ships across the system. So let me be absolutely clear about what happens next. Taman said, You have shown us that the galaxy respects only strength. You have shown us that survival requires the willingness to fight. You have shown us that sometimes good people must become dangerous to protect what they love. He paused and let his words sink in. In the silence that followed, they could all hear the sound of human ships powering up their engines and weapon systems. It is time for war. The moment Taman Park walked out of the council chamber, everything changed across the galaxy. Within minutes of his declaration, human ships began moving in ways that shocked every alien military commander who was watching. Ships that had been doing peaceful cargo runs suddenly showed energy signatures that belonged to warships. Mining vessels that looked old and slow began broadcasting military identification codes. Research stations that seemed harmless started launching fighter squadrons. Admiral Seungjin Ko stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable and watched his tactical displays fill with green dots representing human ships. For 30 years, these ships had been pretending to be exactly what they appeared to be: cargo haulers and mining ships and research vessels and colony transports. Now they were dropping their disguises and showing the galaxy what humans had really been building. All ships report ready status, his communications officer announced. Around the Admiral Bridge, crew members worked at stations that had been hidden behind false panels until today. The civilian bridge of a cargo ship had become the command center of a heavy battle cruiser in less than 10 minutes. Signal from Captain Yoonji Yoon on the Silent Thunder, the officer continued. Stealth fleet is in position and ready to begin operations. The Silent Thunder was invisible to every sensor system that the Council species used. Human scientists had been studying alien technology for decades and had found ways to hide their ships that the aliens never expected. Captain Yoon and her fleet of stealth destroyers had been watching Vorthak activities for months without being detected. What is our total force strength? Admiral Ko asked his tactical officer. 537 combat vessels of cruiser class or larger, came the reply. 2,418 destroyer and frigate class ships. Over 8,000 fighter craft. All ships report full weapons load and adequate supplies for extended operations. The Admiral nodded but did not smile. These numbers represented 30 years of careful planning and secret construction. Every human colony had been building warships disguised as civilian vessels. Every mining operation had been producing military-grade armor and weapons. Every research station had been developing new technologies that could be used in combat. Open a channel to all Council monitoring stations, he ordered. Let them see what we have been hiding. Across the galaxy, alien military commanders watched their sensors with growing alarm as human ships revealed their true capabilities. The cargo ship, that had been making regular deliveries to the Nexari home system, was actually a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to destroy a space station. The mining vessel that worked the asteroid belt near Molaki Space carried weapons that could crack a moon. The research ship that had been studying gas giants was equipped with sensors that could track every ship within 10 light years. On the bridge of his flagship, Representative Zesk of the Vorthak hegemony hissed with anger as he watched human vessels surround every major Vorthak military base. How did they build so many ships without us knowing? He demanded. His tactical officer was a younger Vorthak, with bright green scales who had always been confident in their superiority over humans. Now his voice shook as he read the sensor reports. Admiral, the humans have been hiding their construction inside asteroid mining operations. What we thought were cargo containers were actually ship components being assembled in secret. What we thought were civilian manufacturing facilities were actually military shipyards. How many ships? ZSK asked. Conservative estimate is over. 3,000 combat vessels with more being activated every hour. Sir, they have been building this fleet for decades, right under our sensors, and we never detected any of it. The young officer paused and looked at more data flowing across his screen. Sir, there is something else. The human ships are using technology that we do not recognize. Their energy weapons are more powerful than anything in our database. Their defensive systems are stopping our best scanning attempts. Their engines are faster than anything we have seen from human ships before. Zesk slammed one of his scaled fists against his command chair. Impossible. Humans are a primitive species. They do not have the knowledge to build such advanced technology. That was when Colonel Wu Jin Han's voice came over the communications system. The message was being broadcast to every Vorthak ship and base from the human battle fleet. Attention Vorthak hegemony forces. This is Colonel Han of the Terran Liberation Army. You have 24 hours to release all human prisoners and withdraw from all human territory. Any Vorthak vessel found in human space after that time will be destroyed without warning. The message continued with a list of human colonies that had been attacked and a demand for compensation for the families of those who had been killed. But what shocked the Vorthak most was the casual mention of the Terran Liberation Army. The humans had not just built a secret fleet, they had built a secret army. On research stations throughout Council space, Dr. Nari Kwan and her team of human scientists were also dropping their disguises. For years, they had been studying alien biology and developing weapons that would be effective against different species. The spray that made Nexari crystal bodies brittle. The sound frequency that disrupted Moleki nervous systems. The chemical that made Vorthak scales fall off. But the most impressive revelation came from General Kangmin Seo, who had been commanding human military forces that the Council never knew existed. Hidden bases throughout the galaxy began broadcasting their locations and capabilities. Asteroid forts with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Underground bunkers on planets that the Council thought were empty. Space stations disguised as debris fields that could launch surprise attacks. The humans have been preparing for war since the day they signed the treaty, General Seo announced in a message to all Council forces. Every colony ship carried weapons, every trade mission gathered intelligence, every diplomatic meeting was an opportunity to study your weaknesses. You thought we were learning how to be civilized. We were learning how to fight you. The most shocking discovery came when human ships began rescuing prisoners from Vorthak detention facilities. Captain Junho Park led the assault on the main Vorthak prison planet and found something that changed everything. The missing humans were there, but they were not alone. Thousands of aliens from dozens of different species were also being held prisoner. Admiral Ko, this is Captain Park reporting from the prison planet, came the message over military channels. Sir, you need to see this. The Vorthak have been taking prisoners from many species, not just humans. We have found Kelthari and Zephyrian and Drui captives here. Some have been imprisoned for years. The captain's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Sir, the genetic experiments that Dr. Choi discovered were not limited to humans. The Vorthak have been harvesting biological material from every species they could capture. This is not just an attack on humanity. This is an attack on everyone who is not part of the Council power structure." That revelation changed the entire nature of the conflict. Suddenly, human ships were receiving messages of support from species that the Council had written off as too primitive or too weak to matter. The supposedly extinct Zephyrians had not been wiped out by Vorthak attacks. They had been hiding and waiting for someone strong enough to fight back. Commander Soyoung-oh led the rescue operations on dozens of prison worlds and found the same pattern everywhere. The Council's junior species were not just being ignored. They were being systematically enslaved and exploited by the very organization that claimed to protect them. The human war against the Vorthak became a liberation campaign for half the galaxy. "This is Commander O to all human vessels," came the broadcast from the rescue fleet. "We have confirmation that the Council has been using the Vorthak as their enforcement arm for illegal activities throughout the galaxy. The missing populations from 17 different species have been found in Vorthak facilities. We are not just fighting for human freedom. We are fighting for the freedom of everyone who has been abandoned by the Council." Within hours of the human declaration of war, the conflict had spread far beyond what anyone expected. Species that had been silent for decades began broadcasting their own declarations of independence from Council authority. Planets that had been stripped of resources began demanding compensation. Colonies that had been forced to relocate began returning to their original homes. The Council had created their own worst nightmare. By teaching humans that the galaxy respected only strength, they had created an enemy that was stronger than anything they could handle. By showing humans that civilization was a lie, they had motivated them to build something better. By threatening human children, they had awakened something in humanity that the aliens did not understand. The war that followed would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Not because it would be long or destructive, but because for the first time in galactic history, someone was fighting for justice instead of profit. Someone was using their strength to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Someone had decided that civilization meant more than just the survival of the powerful. The humans had learned their lesson well. They understood that the galaxy respected only strength. Now they were about to teach the galaxy what human strength really looked like. The war lasted exactly 21 days. When it was over, the Galactic Council no longer existed, and half the species in the galaxy had new governments. The Vorthak hegemony had surrendered after their home fleet was destroyed in a battle that lasted 4 hours. The Nexari crystal cities were occupied by human peacekeepers who treated their prisoners better than the Nexari had ever treated anyone else. The Malaki commercial empire collapsed when human ships blocked all their trade routes and freed the slave workers who had been building their wealth for centuries. Captain Junho Park walked through the detention facility on Vorthak Prime, where war criminals were being held for trial. The cells were clean and well lit, and the prisoners received regular meals and medical care. This was very different from the prison camps that the humans had found on Vorthak worlds. Those places had been dark and cruel and filled with the suffering of innocent beings from dozens of species. "The trials begin tomorrow," his aide Lieutenant Jaehyun Moon told him as they walked past cells containing former council representatives. "We have over 3,000 prisoners awaiting judgment for crimes against sentient beings. The evidence files alone take up 17 computer databases." Captain Park nodded, but did not look pleased. "How many species have agreed to participate in the new tribunal system?" 41 so far," Lieutenant Moon replied. "The Kelthari and Zephyrian delegates arrived yesterday. The Drui are sending their elder council. Even some of the former council species have requested to join the proceedings. They want to testify against their former leaders." The new tribunal system was something that had never existed before in galactic history. Instead of the council's system where powerful species made all the decisions, now every species would have an equal voice in determining justice. Crimes would be judged by representatives of all affected species, not just the winners of military conflicts. They reached the cell of former council speaker Veltharion, who sat quietly on his simple bed reading from a datapad. The crystalline, being looked up as they passed and spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "Captain Park, may I speak with you?" Captain Park stopped and looked at the former leader of the galaxy's most powerful species. "What do you want to say, Veltharian?" "I want to understand something that makes no sense to me," the Nexari said. "Your species had the power to destroy us completely. Your weapons could have turned our worlds to dust. Your fleets could have enslaved our people as we enslaved others. Instead, you built prisons that are more comfortable than the homes of many beings in the galaxy. Why did you show mercy to those who showed you none?" Captain Park considered the question carefully before answering. "Because we are not you," he said simply. "We did not fight this war to become the new oppressors. We fought to end oppression." "There is a difference. But you could rule the galaxy now," Veltharian insisted. "Your military power is greater than anything that has ever existed. Your technology is more advanced than ours. Your species could take whatever they wanted from any world they chose. This is how power has always worked." "That is exactly why it had to change," Captain Park replied. "Power without justice is just organized cruelty. Strength without mercy is just sophisticated barbarism. You taught us that lesson very well." 3 days later, Ambassador Taman Park stood in a very different chamber, addressing representatives from over 60 species. The new Galactic Assembly met in a space station that humans had built near the edge of Council space. The chamber was designed so that every species had equal seating and equal access to communication systems. There were no junior species platforms and no elevated positions for senior members. "The first order of business," Taman announced, "is the establishment of the Universal Declaration of Sentient Rights. This document will guarantee that no being can be enslaved or experimented upon or murdered for the convenience of others. Every species will have the right to govern their own worlds and control their own destiny." The declaration had been written by representatives from all the species that had been oppressed by the old council system. It included protections that had never existed before in galactic law: the right to refuse genetic experimentation, the right to maintain traditional cultures, the right to defend home territories against invasion, the right to seek justice when these other rights were violated. Dr. Myung Bae, who had become the first director of interspecies relations, read the final version aloud to the assembled delegates. The document was longer and more detailed than any previous galactic treaty because it had to address the mistakes of the past while preventing new ones in the future. "Every sentient being has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of their species' natural development," she read. "No being may be forced to surrender these rights in exchange for protection from others. No government may claim authority over beings who have not freely chosen to accept that authority. No species may be judged primitive or junior based on their technology level or political organization." The declaration was approved by unanimous vote. For the first time in galactic history, every species had agreed to the same basic principles of how civilized beings should treat each other. The vote was not binding under the old system of galactic law because there was no old system anymore. The humans had not just won a war. They had created an entirely new way for the galaxy to govern itself. The most dramatic change came in how conflicts between species were resolved. Instead of the powerful making decisions for the weak, the new system required mediation and negotiation between equals. Instead of military strength determining outcomes, justice was decided by independent tribunals with representatives from uninvolved species. Commander So-Young-Oh had been placed in charge of the new galactic peacekeeping force, which included ships and personnel from over 30 different species. The force was not controlled by any single government, and its mission was to protect innocent beings rather than serve political interests. "We received a distress call from the Mathara system," she reported to the assembly during one of their regular sessions. "A group of refugee ships was being attacked by pirates near the border between Drui and former Malaki space. Our response fleet included human destroyers, Kelthari fighters, and Zephyrian medical ships. The pirates were captured without casualties, and the refugees were safely escorted to their destination. This kind of cooperation had been impossible under the old council system, where each species looked out only for their own interests. Now species were working together because they shared common values rather than common fears. The transformation was not limited to military matters. Dr. Nari Kwan led a new research initiative that shared scientific knowledge freely between all member species. Technologies that had been kept secret for centuries were now being used to solve problems throughout the galaxy. Medical treatments that had been restricted to wealthy species were now available to everyone. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions were being taught to any world that needed them. The humans have given us something more valuable than military victory, said Elder Thurim of the Kelthari during one assembly session. They have given us hope that intelligence can triumph over instinct, that cooperation can be more powerful than competition, that the strong can choose to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. But the most important change was in how young beings throughout the galaxy learned about their place in the universe. Children growing up in the new galactic civilization were taught that all species had value regardless of their size or technology or military power. They learned that differences between species made the galaxy more interesting rather than more dangerous. They learned that working together produced better results than fighting each other. 5 years after the war ended, Taman Park stood in his office aboard the new Sol station, looking out at stars that seemed brighter than they had before. Ships from dozens of species moved through space, carrying cargo and passengers and ideas between worlds that had once been enemies. The galaxy had become a larger and more wonderful place. His aide, Lieutenant Jae-hyun Moon, brought him the daily reports from across the assembly territories. New species were asking to join the organization almost every week. Planets that had been damaged by the old system were being rebuilt with help from their former enemies. Children who had been born in slavery were now growing up free and educated, and full of possibilities. "Sir, we have received first contact signals from beyond the galactic rim," Lieutenant Moon reported. "There are other civilizations out there that have heard about our assembly and want to know more about our system of government. They are asking if we would be willing to teach them how to organize their own territories based on our principles." Taman smiled and looked back at the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders that humanity had never imagined. But now they would explore those wonders as friends rather than conquerors. They would meet new species as equals rather than threats. They would build a civilization based on justice rather than power. The humans had learned their lesson about how the galaxy worked. Now they were teaching the galaxy a new lesson about how it could work better.